Okay, good. Deep breathing. Inhale. So there's a couple of things, I talk a lot about joint angle positions and geometry positions. So, as a traditional art, even the simplified Tai Chi came from the traditional. But, not everyone, they use some basic geometry, the corners more as a direction, and they would say that's 45-degree corner and so forth. But, they don't really get too involved with the angular positions because maybe it's just not something that they did as traditional art, as a course of reference. So I use those as reference points because if you're referencing your body, and referencing is something that the traditionalists use because, what other location can you use other than what typically people would use is your eye level, your nose, your ears, your shoulders, your hips. You use those because even little kids, they learn about parts of their body, right? First thing you do, you learn about your eyes, your ears, your nose, your teeth. Those are things that are in Chinese school. Yeah, yeah. And you learn different parts. Your hands, your feet, your legs. So that's just learning a basic anatomy. So when we move, we look at the hips. When we're like this, and we turn to this corner, and we look for this alignment, this foot should actually come to the outside of that center line. So between the 2 feet, some people go even wider. But that's actually, to me, not good because it's too wide. So you don't want to be on your center line when it comes to your footwork because then it gets too narrow. If you go about 3, maybe 4 inches to the outside of that center line, then you have 2 inches on each side of the center line. Now, if I actually straighten this foot and tracked it all the way down here straight, I would essentially still be in my shoulder width stance, right? If we pull our heels together like this, we pivot on the balls of our feet, we're in a shoulder width stance. So that's referencing but also measuring it out. So then if you use that as a guideline, then when you see yourself in the mirror and you say, well, this is the leg position, that's your target foot position. Okay. So anything inside of that or outside of this point would be the wrong stance for you. So then when we go like this, it's kind of a challenge to just bring your foot around like that and still have control. So based on the concept that I talked about, summation of components, if my foot is here and my hips are facing there, one way of getting my foot in the shoulder width frontal position is to first turn your hips, right? And then you bring your foot out like that. So that looks like a point A to point B to C. So that looks kind of rigid. So you take it like this. You come out and then start turning your hips. Then your foot is already out and you bring it to that point. Then that takes out a bit of the holding the leg up too long and become an isolated motion. Because if I go like this and not turn the hip and just bring my foot out, which the tendency for a lot of people to do, then you're really kind of stressing that thigh out, the top of your thigh. So one of the things when we talk about in Tai Chi, we learn to use less strength or use your mind to direct the movement and not use strength. But in reality, you have to use strength because it's just the way it is. You have to use a certain amount of strength to sustain your leg, to make the contraction, to manipulate your skeleton. So the efficiency of the movement has to do with turning a bit of the hips. But the other thing that comes into play is once you start to turn the hip, then this other leg that's supporting you has to work as well. Because it has to go from here to here. Now you would say, if you looked at my knee, and turn like this, you would say, well, that's misaligned. It's really not in the position lined up with your toe, right? So that's really, is that a conflict? Actually, it's part of compensating for your center of mass. It's okay to do that. And the reason why it's okay to do that is because you're not tilting your knee in. You're turning your hip. So the hip, the knee, and the ankle actually is working together to create a position that's being supported and complemented by three things rather than just put the stress on the single joint. You put stress on the single joint, then you're actually misaligning it in a different way. So that's why a lot of people, when they first do Tai Chi, they have a lot of knee problems. And it's not because of the weight, it's because the other joints are not cooperating with the maneuver. So did you...
Are you moving the hip first and then moving the leg?
So as a... It's happening at the same time, but to develop the idea, you may have to focus on doing that specifically to come to here and then turn, but then lift up a little and then turn till you're in the position that you start to go forward. So you have to... Yeah.
I don't know why it's hard to do it together.
It's hard to do together because your musculature has to be sequential. The sequential order of that action is in conflict. It doesn't know when to let go and when to start to do it. So the only way to learn that is to practice it like that, and then eventually you program that in, and then it starts to like get rid of any of the erroneous things that shouldn't be there. So that's just a simple thing, right? So another thing that I talk about is the 135-degree back corner. So this, and turning like this, requires a waist turn. So if you don't turn your shoulders and don't activate this area of your body, you can't find that corner unless you kind of like start to turn the hips. So a lot of times people they overturn because they do too much arm and too much rotation. So you should just do the same thing. First find your corner, right? If you come straight down here and you turn your body and then lift it up, you're going to be in that back corner. The reason why if you came straight down here and then turn over there is because that's how your arms move. Your arms move like this. If you force the movement, then your arms are going like this, and that's actually straining your shoulder. So if you turn, and Tai Chi is supposed to be a gentle movement, and you force the movement, how can there be a benefit to that? So this is just to give you, the idea behind it, because, there is logic, there is, anatomy, and you have to figure that out. Your body has to know that. And if you don't know it from just through experience or discovery or however else you would figure that out, it would be, could be never discovering it and then finding that you could be hurting yourself because you're really forcing to move it. So that's why when we practice this, if you understand it better, then the tendency to do it will be better because your goals and your transition will be better. Now, if you take that 45-degree corner, because I think that's a direction that people should muscle memory, when you do the single whip, so we cloud hands, right? This is cloud hands. We'll do it toward the mirror. 1, 2, we should be going the other direction. So 1, 2, 3, right? And then when we're on this side, we turn to that 45, which eventually becomes the back side, right? So if I turn to that corner and I hook my wrist, this, in the Yang style Tai Chi, that hook wrist is pretty long. So you don't want to do the single whip and it end up like this. So single whip starts to look like that, and it doesn't look right because it's not the alignment of the posture. So if you're using this, just that basic line, you hook your wrist. I see a lot of, you get into here, but then when you start to do this, this hand starts to, break down, or isn't sustained. So when they speak of consciousness of your movement and, stillness and movement, if you go to this corner and you look for that point and you hook your wrist, that's held. Now, because we're here and we step out, now this hand starts to go across like this, right? Comes across just like that, and then it turns out. So when the hand comes across your body, it's essentially doing this, and then goes to there. When your body reaches the point that it's the most comfortable to push out, so it's here, maybe a little bit outside. So we're not really doing this. You see, we should be tracking our movement, right? We step out. Now this is tracking with the body, and then it comes out here. So then this hand is sustained and you hold it. That gives you the posture. So that's the single whip posture for yang. So that backhand position gives you that line, and that's what makes the movement look right. See, so it feels much more natural. It's easier to draw because the line is this, and we're doing this already in cloud hands, but yet when we get to this point, it becomes sort of unnatural. It doesn't look smooth. Well, so center is really relative to a space. So this is my center. I turn like this is my center. If this is my center, when I go like this is my center. The center of this line, right? So when we do this, we can't really go through here because our center of mass actually goes behind us. So when we do that movement like in the kick, and we step to that corner, we actually will be moving toward that circle till it gets to here. And that's where you have the natural alignment. Then you're going to fold your elbows and you turn the hip, and then this goes back to here. And now the hand is essentially here, but not quite like that. Because when you're like this, your center goes to your back. So now you're back heavy and you're not going to feel unstable. You see, so body form ties to center, mass, and balance. But like Rob's saying, the center line is here. We're here, so we're moving. So this is approaching that center line. It's because we have a side position. This essentially is really 45. So this would be not directly there. See, Rob, if I went to, because my body is 45 like this, my line actually would be there, but it doesn't line up like that. It's 135 degrees. So this movement is not centered based on this center or that center. It's the in-between one, like when we're like this. That's the in-between one. This is center. This is center. Strum the lute. That's the space that went like this, and then it went like that. The center narrowed because the profile narrowed, because your image becomes projected into a point further out. That's what, like, when your eyes merge, you really see, each eye actually sees straight. But when you look at an object, the eyes merge and you see one. So you always have like one eye that's dominant, one eye that's not. You know how the eye doctors check you, they make a circle and you say, okay, look through that eye. I looked at other, which one's in the circle? The one's a dominant eye. So the focus point becomes one. So when we move, then we have that. And this is like this. And then we come to here. That stays there. If we're like this, then we're like this. So this comes, folds, and then it tracks right to the middle. But between this point and this point is the rotation. That's the torso movement. So when we speak of hand, eye, body, waist, and stance, the hand and eyes work as a relationship. So we always track the hands because we have to get not just the visuals, but the sense of hand-eye coordination. The body is the posture. The waist is the torso movement. And then the legs. The legs is the final thing because they're what you focus on to distinguish.
So I'm trying to figure two of these motions here. When we're doing a step, we're reaching out in an empty stance and we're turning
Yeah.
something at that point. But then when the foot is down and we're leaning forward, we're turning the body to complete the
Yeah.
single whip. I'm trying to get those two together somehow. I'm missing something.
So because the single whip is sort of a half stance, not completely turning to here. Like brush knee, you would turn all the way around. So this joint actually closes, right? That closes. It closes because if you put your hand in this crease and you close, you would feel that it folded in. So when you're standing straight, it's in the neutral position. When you turn like this and turn like this, it folds. Because we're here and I open the stance like this, and I'm here. When I come out, I'm just straightening this and transferring weight to there. But this hip doesn't turn there. So that might be, one of the things that, because if you turn there, then this hand and this is no longer aligned as a true movement that goes through the body. So you have to look at the body form. So the body form is, it has a structural integrity too. Because in this position actually, because he's angled like this, the force that goes here, right, goes into here and is actually supported by that back leg. If he turned his hip toward me this way, then he push here, it's actually not supported. Because the alignment of this, right, so the hip is 45 there, and then you turn the body. So it's like this. So, and then this is in that corner. So if I sink my elbow, it would be here. This would be here. This would be here.
So I'm at this point here, I'm completing the turn. Not completing, I'm just making more of the turn.
Yeah.
At this point, so when
Yeah.
I'm doing the step,
Yeah.
I'm this way here. So I'm reaching off to my side
Yeah.
rather than my front.
You reach out, but your hip should have turned before that.
The hip
You should actually sort of use your hip to bring your leg closer to here before you touch down.
So maybe over this way,
Yeah,
and then I do a little bit more of a turn as I
yeah, and then there's a point you stop, and then you end up here, and then this because your shoulder should be over here. Actually, relax this if you can, and it should be here. So you should have 135 degrees like that. So that's how your single whip should be. But sometimes when you're going into that position, maybe because then this hand ends up like this even. I see that sometimes. So that's one of the postures that if you fix that posture, then the single whip will be. Because you have that in the 2042 too, and you have it in some other forms. But, that just gives you an idea. So when you're like this, so how do you practice that, right? Well, if you're like this and you turn, and then you come out, you don't have to actually do that. you actually should soften the leg, and it comes out like that. So your foot is relaxed, and it goes up. So even in softening the feet, right, your toes would do this. Because you're like this. Because if you did this, then the foot is not relaxed. Yeah. So then, because we have our hands, the hands become softer. When we come out, the foot becomes softer. Then we have a softer landing, and then we just go forward. So we can actually get here in empty stance, and then just start to go forward with the hand. Because the forwardness of the hand becomes part of that push, because part of that push becomes part of this extension. So upper lower coordination is that. It has to tie together as a unit. Yeah. So this will build some strength in the leg, but it doesn't build integration of the body. So once you have sort of that amount of arc, then you begin to tie your hands together. Because brush knee like this, and then put the hand there, is broken. Whereas when you're like this, and then you start to step out, you have a balance, because this is here and this is there. It helps you support yourself in a balance, because that leg becomes sort of the fulcrum point between the two sides. So hand movement and leg movement work better together. But as a training tool to isolate a motion, to make sure you have the right pattern, is just working on a specific technique there. So in other words, if I do this, I'm just practicing how much to turn. And we do this as a hand movement. When we do the leg movements, we want to know how much to turn, and when, and how much. Then when we put it together, then we know that this has to go together. Or if we're here, that this has to go together. So that when this goes out, then we turn and everything just squares up. So that's the beauty of the movement. That's how we get the movements to look, so. Yeah, we can do the form again. Yeah. Okay, ready? So we're going to start off. Oh, sorry. I jumped the gun. Well, that's not a good term, huh? This is actually a heel kick. And then you do 2 punches to the air. Single whip. Down. So see where your backhand is. See, let's try that again. See, that's what I saw, you know, after we do the kick, and we hook the wrist, we should start there and just leave that there as you go down and then go up. And then this hand would come down, and then the same thing happens on the other side. You hook your wrist, and you go up, right? And then you go to golden cockerel. Then we go to this corner. Go to this corner. Then we sit back, insert the needle, spread the hands, turn, parry and punch, turn out, so it's that, that, that. Back corner, this is repulsed monkey. Actually, even grasp the sparrow's tail. Once you roll back, you go in this direction, it comes by here, then you fold here, then you end up pressing. The front foot was flat there. Now this one goes up, and then you go over. So you know the format of it is just getting to those positions and creating those lines better. Yeah. I mean, if you just run through the forms like we always do, then you really don't know where you should be focusing on to get it to evolve a little bit. So it's kind of interesting. It's body mechanics, it's body proprioception, and your body will start to understand that. It's body intelligence. And, I think that's pretty important stuff to have, when you have age of degeneration or, whatever it is that happens. And we can, it's sort of like when they talk about when people, want to get in shape, or they want to lose weight, or it's harder to go from one extreme to the other. It's easier to maintain, So if you always are conscious of it and you don't go to the extremes, then you never have to come back to the middle. And when you do come back to the middle, it just bounces back and forth. So that's why a lot of people have trouble with that. So they diet, they over-exercise because they think they're trying to achieve something. Sometimes people that exercise like that end up crashing, and the body just